Hello YouTube and welcome to my very own speculation on the Second Great War. Because there are lots of other Great War speculation videos and theories, I want to take a different approach for this video. In this video I want to answer the question, can the Empire win a Second Great War? And if not, can the Empire survive a Second Great War? But before we start, I want to once again shameless self-promote my Steam group, the Elder Scrolls Scholars Guild. Last week someone commented I had made a spelling error in the name, so yeah, that was embarrassing. Anyway, I fixed this now since I made a new group and I copied all the things from the old group to the new group, so if you would like to ask lore questions to me or the community itself and pitch video requests, or just want to interact with other Elder Scrolls lore fans, consider joining. And another thing before we start, this video is highly based on speculation and my own logic. There's probably many things that a lot of you will disagree with, which is fine, but some of you asked for my speculation, so here is my speculation. It's not a fact, it's just a speculation. That said, let's kick off. To answer the question, can the Empire win a Second Great War with the Altmerry Dominion, we first have to set some rules in place. First, in the scenario I'm going to create, there will be no other forces present than those from the Empire and the Altmerry Dominion. So, Argonia, Akavir or any other army will not be present in this scenario. I will also leave the Khajiit mainly out of the picture, since it's never really confirmed if they ever fought in the First Great War, and the elves have a long history of looking down upon the Khajiit as an inferior and undisciplined race. And the second point I want to make clear is what I see as winning the war. The term winning the war is defined in my point as the Empire will keep all its current territories, Skyrim included, and conquer back large portions of Elsewhere and or Valenwood. So now we can finally begin talking about who would win a second military conflict between the Altmerry Dominion and the Empire. The first thing, of course, we need to know before we even can start speculating is the size of both armies. Let's start with the Empire. We know for a fact that the Empire had at least 10 legions under its command during the First Great War. This was already, well, sizably smaller than that it had once been during the days of Septim Range. At the end of the Great War, these legions that were already in place were reduced to about 20% of their original size. After signing the White Gold Concordat, the Emperor knew he had to have the Imperial army back at its full strength, the strength it had once been during the Septim days, to about, well, let's say 18 to 20 legions. We first need to ask ourselves, can the Emperor actually do that? The answer is yes, and he did. To understand that by the time of Skyrim, 30 years have passed since the First War, and in that period, 3 generations of humans have been born that are now between the age of 20 and 40. This means that the Emperor has enough men to restore the Imperial army to its former glory. So, assuming he did that, in this speculation I will go of, well, let's say 17 to 18 legions. I already hear the angry commenters type about how weak the Empire is in Skyrim and how the commanders say the forces are spread a little thin these days and therefore they need to recruit locally. To counter that argument, there is a quote from General Tullius who says that the entire army is encamped on the border with the Dominion and Cyrodiil. The Empire does not want to send any troops because the Emperor wants to be prepared at any time for a Second Great War. You must understand that the Emperor is not a fool. He knows a Second Great War will come, and he knew from the get-go he needed to prepare for it once the first was over. So with that out of the way, we need to assume the Dominion strength now. We know that in the First War, the Dominion had about 3 armies. One large army invading Cyrodiil, which was completely destroyed after the Great War. One a bit smaller army invading Hammerfell, which was cut almost in half by the end of the Great War. And a presumed third army that probably was still garrisoned in Altmerry cities and was a bit smaller than the 2 others. This third army is never really confirmed, but it is true that after the Great War, the Dominion was still in better fighting shape than the Empire. So I presume that the Altmerry Dominion had at least enough troops left to defend their own borders at the end of the war. Therefore, I will be taking this invisible third army into account in this video. So how big is the Altmerry army now? We know for a fact that elves in the Elder Scrolls reproduce slower than men, because they get much older than men do. This means that the soldiers lost in the war are less easily replaced, so my guess is that they would have recruited a lot of new elves into the army, but nearly not enough to replace all soldiers lost in the First Great War. My best guess is that they would now have about 2 full armies of well-trained elves. My best guess is that those armies must be about 5 times the size of an Imperial Legion. This is based on the 2 legions who were defending Hammerfell during the First Great War, who were greatly outnumbered by 1 Thalmor army. Alright, now we have the assumed sizes of both armies. 17 Imperial Legions versus 2 Altmerry armies. If you do all the math, it means that there's about 1.7 Imperial Legionnaire for every Elvish soldier. So far the numbers seem to be in the Empire's favor, but we have not yet looked at the strength of each army itself. Before we can assume the strength of both armies, we will need to have a realistic sense of what the composition of each army might be. We know that the Empire has light units, heavy units, archers, cavalry and battle mages. Because the Empire is heavily based on the ancient Roman Empire, I have used the old game Rome Total War to get a realistic sense of a possible composition of the Imperial army. Again, this is not confirmed or anything, this is just something I take to get, well, something that could be the composition of an Imperial army. And from that I have concluded that the Imperial army must consist out of about, well, 10% cavalry, 20% archers, 24% light units and a main bulk of 42% heavy units. For the Empire we know that battle mages are operating in special units. There is probably not that much of these units, but I think it's safe to assume that every legion has at least 1 unit of battle mages. So I suppose that means, well, about 2% of the army is battle mages. So about 10% cavalry, 20% archers, 24% light units, 42% heavy units and 2% battle mages. As for the Dominion, we have much less to go on. We know they have light soldiers, heavy soldiers, archers, wizards, probably some cavalry, and we have the high mages. Now these high mages are never really seen in any of the games, but in Skyrim 2 Altmerry guards in the embassy talk about how Elenwen had a unit of Eleanor high mages brought in to protect the embassy. I presume they will also have cavalry, just like the Empire, but I don't think they have that much. Just like the Empire, there is, well, in the Elder Scrolls not just that much need for it. So we do not know the exact composition of the Altmerry army, but after some consideration I think I may have a realistic sense of what an Altmerry army might look like. As for the high mages, my best guess is that they are a bit like the Imperial battle mages, a small specialized units in about the same amount as the Imperial battle mages. So that brings my speculation of an Altmerry army at about 28% light units, 30% heavy units, 20% archers, 10% wizards, and 10% cavalry, and then 2% battle mages. Now we have a realistic view of what both armies could possibly look like. I say this very carefully, as none of this is, again, never confirmed, and mostly is just speculated by me. So, now we have a sense of how large the armies are and what they could possibly look like. But there's still a lot to take in consideration, because the strength of an army is for a large portion determined by the strength of its soldiers. To determine this, I've looked at NPC stats and gear for some, well, hours or days from Skyrim and Oblivion as well. I will not go through the entire process in the video because that would take hours, but I found that on average Imperial heavy soldiers are 39% stronger than Altmerry heavy soldiers. I take Altmerry heavy soldiers as having a sword and shield, so they cannot use magic. Imperial light soldiers as 15% weaker than Altmerry light soldiers, because Altmerry light soldiers are, well, the soldiers with just a sword and a spell in the other hand. Imperial archers are, well, 30% weaker than Altmerry archers. And Imperial battle mages are, looking at the stats, 28% stronger than standard Altmerry mages, but they are 10% weaker than Altmerry high mages. Since there's no actual high mage in any of the games present, I have used the stats of Rurindil, a Thalmor mini-boss, for the stats of an Alinor High Mage, since his stats are, well, they are a little above the average wizard. So how are we going to determine what army is stronger? First, we take a pack of about, well, 100 Altmerry soldiers. That would mean there is 30 heavy soldiers, 28 light soldiers, 20 archers, 10 mages and 2 high mages. We know that the Imperial army is on average about 70% bigger than its Altmerry counterpart. So against those 100 soldiers stand 170 Imperial soldiers, which means 73 heavy troops, 41 light troops, 34 archers and 3 battle mages. In this example I will keep the cavalry out of the picture because both armies have about 10% cavalry, and since we have no official source stating the strength of each side's cavalry, I guess they must be, well, pretty evenly matched. So now we want to be able to compare both armies. So what we do is multiply each Imperial unit with its supposed strength versus an Altmerry soldier. For example, we multiply 73 with 1.39 to make up for the strength difference. This lets us know that the Imperial heavy troops have the strength of 98 Altmerry soldiers. We will do the same for all the light troops. 41 troops multiplied by 0.85 is 34 light troops. So 41 light Imperial troops have the strength of 34 Altmerry light troops. So when we do that for all the soldier strengths, we get 98 Imperials versus 30 heavy Altmerry troops, 34 light Imperials versus 28 light Altmerry troops, 34 Imperial archers versus 26 Altmerry archers, 4 Imperial battle mages versus 10 Altmerry wizards. And all that's left now are the high mages. So here's what we'll do. We'll determine how much stronger a high mage is compared to an Altmerry wizard. Then we will compensate the 10 wizards with the force of the 2 high mages. So doing the math, I found that the high mages are on average 27% stronger than a regular wizard. So to compensate for the strength of those mages, we will get 4 Imperial battle mages versus about 13 Altmerry wizards. So now we have a sense of what a battle would be like when all soldiers have equal power. 98 heavy Imperials versus 30 heavy Altmerries, 34 light Imperials versus 28 Altmerries, 34 Imperial archers versus 26 Altmerry archers, and 4 Imperial battle mages versus the power of 13 Altmerry wizards. So if you look at the numbers, you cannot deny that the Empire's army is stronger when it comes to raw power. Since we do not know exactly how the armies are going to fight, I've run multiple calculations at multiple scenarios, placing the Empire's army at about 19.3% to 56.6% stronger than the Altmerry army in terms of raw power. In this speculation I will take the lowest number, or the worst case scenario. Even in the worst case scenario, the Imperial army would still be 19.3% stronger than its Altmerry counterpart. So we know that if it would come to a large scale battle on an open field, the Empire would definitely have the upper hand. So far, there's one large problem with this. And some of you might have already guessed it. The field of battle is never truly flat. So what terrain are we dealing with? Let's take a look at the border of Cyrodiil. I have followed the border of Cyrodiil in Oblivion, and on the border the Altmerry Dominion is clearly in the advantage, since the Empire would have to climb over the hills first. Those hills are by the time of Skyrim probably heavily fortified. On the Empire side of the border there's also a lot of fortifications, since we know almost all of the army is currently based there. It's therefore safe to assume that the Altmerry Dominion would not win if they were to attack the Empire there, since the Imperial army is at least 90.3% stronger, and they have the advantage of the fortresses and encampments they made on the border. This actually makes sense, since we know the Thalmor have helped Ulfric Stormcloak with his rebellion in the past. The Thalmor want the Empire to divert their troops away from the border so that the Thalmor can safely attack Cyrodiil. The Emperor, however, does not want to send reinforcements to Skyrim. General Tullius actually tells us that he has requested reinforcements but does not get them because the Emperor wants to be as strong as possible on the border of Cyrodiil. Therefore, the Legion is forced to recruit locally in Skyrim, which results in the poorly trained soldiers we see in Skyrim. So, after all this, we can be pretty sure that in Skyrim's setting, so the setting you enter once the game begins, the Empire would be able to survive a second Great War, meaning it would be able to keep its current territory. But can the Empire, in the worst case scenario of a 19.3% advantage, actually win a second Great War? The answer is probably no. Let me explain this. On the border of Valenwood and Cyrodiil it's mostly hills, which means that even before they have set foot in Valenwood, the Dominion would have the high ground, and they would have advantages of their forts. Well, okay, let's say they manage to get over the hills and end up in central Valenwood. Those with a slight understanding of Valenwood would have already thought of my next argument. Valenwood consists largely out of uninhabited dense forests. The Bosmer of Valenwood are experts on warfare in these kinds of areas, but the Imperial soldiers are not. The Imperial soldiers will therefore quickly lose any advantages they had because of their raw strength. So an invasion of Valenwood would not be possible at the current state. So then let's take a look at elsewhere. How would the Empire fare elsewhere? Yeah, sorry. Probably largely the same. First, they would have to cross the fortified hills, and then they would have to fight in the desert. As we have seen in the First Great War, the Empire might actually win a desert battle with the Dominion armies. But remember how I talked about the Khajiit largely not participating in the Second Great War? Well, they would now. Elsewhere is their homeland. So they will fight, if not under Dominion control, then by themselves. So the Empire would once again lose every strength and strategic advantage they might have in Cyrodiil. So an invasion of elsewhere, well, I don't really see it happen. So, conclusion. The Empire will definitely survive a Great War, but it will not win a second Great War. The Thalmor know this, and therefore they try to let the Empire divert troops away from the border, because they know this war will not be easy, like the first one. Because in the first one, they largely caught the Empire by surprise. Now the Empire is more militarized and as prepared as it can. A lot of people always seem to think the Empire is unprepared, but those people do not realize that the Emperor is not stupid. He knows a second Great War is coming, so he knew from day one he had to prepare for it. So he did, and then arrived at the current stalemate. This was by far my most complicated video until now. I've had to do calculations for nearly 4 days that made Dark Souls seem easy, and at one point I was just like, let it stop. Anyway, I want to remind all of you that this speculation is shaky at best, since a lot of it is based on single sentences in lore or even out of game sources and speculation. But I hope you've enjoyed it anyway, and leave your thoughts in the comments below or in the forum of my Steam group. To join the group, go to the link in the description. There are some more things I would like to say before I end the video. First, I want to thank my friend Benjamin and my girlfriend Leonie for helping me with some calculations. I'm not that much of a math professor, but with their help I managed to get all the work done. Second, yes, I've noticed I reached 1,000 subscribers, and for that I want to thank all of you. And I want to thank all of you for the support and all the great feedback you guys give me on every video. But I also want to thank someone else. I want to thank my good friend Sam. He has greatly helped me with making my videos better, therefore I would like to ask my Dutch subscribers to also check out his channel. He makes Dutch gameplay videos of games like Unturned, and I personally love his videos, especially his Unturned and Overwatch montages. I even appear in some of the Unturned footage, mainly raging about being killed, but it's me, so yeah. So if you're Dutch and like that kind of thing, please check out his channel as well, as he has been working very hard and his videos keep getting better every day. That said, if you liked the video, consider liking or subscribing, since it helped my channel out a great deal. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.